just very sickening how and I don't know if you're going to get into this, so I don't want to steal your thunder, but a lot of the research showed that they did actually know that there was a big addictive potential to this stuff. But the research series was not released to the actual clinicians, or even perhaps to the FDA, or maybe the FDA did know about it and didn't exactly, or look the other way, for lack of a better word. So, yeah, what else did you kind of stumble on in your research that you wanted to share in this episode?
So to your point about those physicians, you're absolutely correct. Physicians did not know about the addictive potential. And we touched about this a little bit when we talked about the masking episode that we did. We have to recognize that a lot of physicians, we don't really... Let me phrase it this way. Not every physician does their own independent research. A lot of the times, information is passed to us, in an educational series from either our employer, hospital organizations, or many times from the pharmaceutical companies directly themselves. And we're kind of using that to guide our clinical decisions, because it'd be impossible to look at every single study for every single drug that we prescribe. And this is how continuing medical education is done today. We go to a lecture about a drug, and there's a representative that will tell us, how great the drug is or how bad the drug is, whatever their take on it is. And, those are the things that kind of influence our medical decision making in terms of the medication that we prescribe. So the way that these opioid drugs were kind of pitched by the pharmaceutical companies, like I talked about, was that it's a good thing that we need to treat pain. Pain is a major issue that's going unrecognized. There's people suffering, and you guys are doctors, and it's your inherent responsibility to be empathetic to those issues and to give them the appropriate treatment. That was the way it was pitched. In fact, and it wasn't just the pharmaceutical industry at the time, they were kind of riding the wave of this bigger let's say a recognition going on at the time that considered pain to be the fifth vital sign.
Right.
So, you have heart rate, respiratory rate, blood pressure, and, there was a push in the medical industry saying that, okay, pain needs to be taken as seriously as all those other vital signs. And the issue with that is, it's hard to define what pain is. Right. Everybody has a different threshold for pain. Everybody has different pain tolerance. It's very, very, very difficult to quantify, how much of, aspirin, Tylenol, even opioids, how much is actually reducing the pain, because there is such a subjective element to it. And so many individuals define pain differently. So, of course, it was a challenge back then, but even today, we still don't really know, and there's an ongoing debate. There's a whole subspecialty dedicated to pain, actually, and the management of pain. It's an incredibly complex and complicated topic.
Yeah, and it's such a double-edged sword, right? Because although we are psychiatry residents, we did have to do internal medicine rotations, quite a bit of them, actually. And there are people that do require this medicine too. So as much as we talk about the addiction side of it, it's important to highlight even the people that do actually live with potential chronic pain conditions that do really need to be on this medicine. Most particularly people like palliative care, people on certain hospice situations. They do really warrant using this medicine in the proper way so that they can live lives that are at least pleasurable, tolerable. And so I think it's so important in the midst of conversations like these to talk about the importance of how can we use this medicine in a responsible way to get it into the hands of the patients that truly need it.
And that's always the dilemma, right? Because there are, I'm not defending Big Pharma here.
Right.
I tend to be very, very skeptical of Big Pharma, especially given the events of the past few years. But they've always maintained that there are people dealing with legitimate pain for whom OxyContin and other opioid medications are making a world of difference in their everyday lives.
Right.
And to a certain degree, that is the truth. I mean, I've certainly worked with patients as the decades have passed, as the overdose deaths have mounted, there's been a push from the medical community to limit the prescription of opioids and scale back on the patients that have been chronically receiving a certain amount of opioids and getting them to try to taper off of it. And I've been on the other end of that when a patient told me like, hey, I've been on this drug for years. This is the only thing that helps me. And like now the government is trying to take this away from me. Like I don't abuse this drug. Like this is the only thing that makes me get out of bed and lets me live my life. So it's an extremely delicate and complicated issue. It's multifaceted. And like, what do you tell a patient like that?
Right.
Yeah, it's a very difficult position to be in. And like we talked about, that kind of story has been used to propagate the agenda of the pharmaceutical industry. It's been used as an excuse for them to promote these drugs, even though they know that there is an addictive aspect to it. So especially in the early days, like you mentioned a little bit earlier on, they did everything that they could to downplay the addictive potential. But eventually we found out that it was a lie, because although they said it's not addictive over and over and over again, later on we found out that during their application for FDA approval for OxyContin, the lead person at FDA raised the red flags that this is potentially addictive. Right. And they told Purdue Pharma to be careful in terms of their marketing because of the addictive potential. So it's right there in the documents. They knew about it and they blatantly lied and caused harm to hundreds of thousands of Americans. Yeah. And here's the interesting thing, Logan.
I think it's way more than that. Hundreds of thousands of Americans. I mean, I think that's almost a very, I would even argue naive way to look at it. I mean, you said 100,000 deaths per year, roughly, and maybe 70% of those are opioids. But those people, they're connected to family members, to the community. So I would say in the tens of millions, if not our entire country, of course, has been impacted. The whole world, I feel like, has been impacted by this stuff now.